Hey guys, here we are in northern Utah. We've been pushing temperatures close to 0 degrees, and our Jeep's been sitting outside for a couple of days. Let's see how this LT1 starts up stone cold at around 0. Make sure our wipers are off. What I've noticed is a lot of guys leave their wipers on the last time they drove it, and then if the wipers are frozen onto the windshield, you don't want them to be trying to work. Here we go. Yeah, fired right up. We're going to be doing a test drive on this. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's a late model JK LT1 10-speed. No, 8-speed. This has got an 8-speed in it here shortly. Just another day in paradise. We're staying warm in this LT1 JK, even though we're below freezing out there. It's actually getting pretty good mileage too. I got 80 miles on less than quarter of a tank, so you'll usually get less mileage the colder it is out, but this one's doing pretty good. The airbag light's on this because we got a broken clock spring, and that's pretty common. This morning we're in a 2012 JK with an LT1 8-speed. This Jeep has character. This Jeep is well used. It has 80,000 miles. It has a broken clock spring. We don't have cruise control or control of the DIC, the digital instrument cluster, because without the clock spring, it's not getting the signals from the steering wheel. You'll see it's about 5 degrees centigrade. That's absolutely tropical. From the last test drive I did in this Jeep, drove it up to northern Utah. We were driving in snowstorms below freezing, well below 0 degrees, and this Jeep has ball tires on it. The customer has new tires, but it was exciting to say the least. When I say this Jeep has character, that's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. This Jeep is well used. It essentially has no functional door locks or windows. We've got dirt pretty much everywhere under the dash. In fact, during my drive in the ice storm, the mode select, or the mode servo, which controls the up and down. In the earlier JKs, it was a mechanical cable, which honestly I prefer. They had problems in 2012 with the high-vac system and the automatic air and all that. They eventually got it sorted, but I'm just the kind of guy that I like mechanical stuff that I can control. So between all the dirt and the freezing temperatures, the mode door servo locked up, and I had to take the dash apart, which isn't hard. You just take the glove box out, and then behind that glove box you're going to see a little black servo motor on the left side. I took it off and I manually operated the door. That way I could melt the ice off the windshield. One other note that I want to make, driving up into these freezing temperatures recently, I've noticed that these LED headlights freeze over. The snow slowly accumulates, and because the LEDs don't put the heat out of the incandescent lights, literally you lose your headlights. So driving at night in a snowstorm with 500 horsepower and ball tires is very exciting. Now, being well used means that there's dust and dirt pretty much everywhere inside and outside of this Jeep, and that's a good thing. I mean, here we have a Jeep that's meant to go off-road, and the guy goes off-road with it. A lot of the Jeeps that we do are mall crawlers, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. I've noticed lately in the shop that a lot of the Jeeps we're doing swaps on are completely pimped out. They've got S-Pos rock lights, cameras, roll bars, atlases, 22-inch rims, just all sorts of stuff, and a lot of these Jeeps have never been off-road. Here's my advice: buy what you need and don't buy any more. Big fancy radios and electronics everywhere. I've got one with a remote start aftermarket alarm that's just packed into everything. All that just makes things more complicated for us and less reliable for you. If you're mainly using your Jeep as a daily driver, you're not crossing the Rubicon, you don't need full skid plates, you don't need extensive rock rails, and body armor, and you're just hauling a bunch of weight around. Now, if you want to do it for looks, okay, I guess that's okay. The moral of the story is, buy what you need. If you got 40-inch tires, you need hydraulic steering. If you got 33-inch tires, you probably don't. And yeah, I've got Jeeps in the shop with 33-inch tires, XD big bore box, and hydraulic rams, which is really overkill for that situation. Try not to go nuts with the electronics. I've got Jeeps with these digital dashes and giant Pioneer and Alpine stereos, and if it's CAN integrated, it's really not so bad. Some of the earlier CAN integrated stereos we saw issues with, but most of the later ones have been doing pretty good. But if it's an invasive alarm, some of the Vipers, they cut into the ignition switches and the wireless module and all that. That's just reducing your reliability. And yeah, we've actually had to remove some of those alarms to keep these Jeeps reliable. The LT in this Jeep performed flawlessly, even in the sub-zero temperatures. In the early days of the LS, the cold temperatures affected the oiling system. And I think in the really early days of the LTs they did also. But GM had to do their homework because you got a dual stage oil pump, which helps in the cold temperatures because you can back that oil pressure off. In the early LSs, the excessive oil pressure could damage the AFM lifters, because when you're below 0 degrees and you fire it up, even though you got a 60-70 pound regulator in the oil pump, pressure could build up higher in other places in the oiling system. So GM ended up putting additional oil pressure regulators in the engine to control the oil pressure more accurately. Now, having control of the oil pressure through a solenoid is one step better than that, and the LTs have that. And I have noticed on the cold starts that the LTs don't build up that high oil pressure like the old LSs did. And remember to always run the right oil for your situation. You don't want to run 2050 in an LT in sub-zero temperatures. The LT engines are tighter. Remember, manufacturers have made these engines tighter and tighter and tighter. Back in the 60s, when you could have thousands clearance on pistons, and the piston would grow and the engine would rattle until that piston grew, those days are over. These manufacturers are running these engines as tight as they can to get the best economy and emissions. So if you run the wrong oil and you start it up on a cold day, the oil's not going to get where it needs to get quick enough, and you'll have premature wear or possibly a failure. So the LT did an excellent job in the snowstorms. I didn't really have any reservations about it, but this is the first time I've really had full-blown LT high gear transmission in those kind of temperatures, and it did perfect. I had 0 issues. Recently I watched a couple of Eddie's videos on getting a stock Wrangler and assessing the capabilities and then modifying it. Don't go out and modify your Jeep for something you're never going to do. Like, if you're never going to hit the dirt, why are you going to buy a $3,000 Atlas? When it comes to things like armor, remember, you're adding a lot of weight to your Jeep. A lot of guys add 300 to 500 pounds to their Jeep, and remember, that's going to affect the economy and the braking and parts wearing and everything else, having to haul that around for 100,000 miles. So if you don't need full flat skid plates made out of steel, front to rear, side to side, don't run them. Don't let that off-road shop talk you into it, especially if you don't do a lot of wheeling. Now, I do think most guys that wheel need rock rails, so pick out what works for you. If you want the electronic ones, that the step comes out, I guess that's okay. They do weigh more and they're more complex, but if that's what you want, that's fine. I think lights are probably where a lot of guys go nuts and they don't really need to. I've had Jeeps with 8, 10 LED bars on the roof, on the hood, on the bumper, on the A-pillars, several of them aiming backwards. I mean, you could light a forest with these things. And if you really need that, that's fine, but just think about the complexity, the aerodynamic drag, the wiring. If you're search and rescue, get what you need, but a lot of these lights are redundant. There's pencil beams and fog lights and diffuse lights for long range or short range, and a lot of them are redundant. I see turning on an extra set of lights just doesn't do any good, so why hang them off your Jeep? I will say, when it comes to lighting and actually everything else in your Jeep, get high quality stuff. We see these LED lights fail all the time. In fact, in some of my videos, you'll see the lights flickering as you bounce down the road. Same thing with the S-Pods. There's good ones and bad ones. And when I say S-Pod, that's pretty much a generic term right now. There's a bunch of them on the market. But we've seen some of the cheaper ones you get off of eBay or whatever go bad. So spend the extra money and get a good quality, especially with electronics. And anything that taps into your CAN bus, whether it's a lock pick or a stereo, make sure it's thoroughly test it. We've seen issues with those. So as with the engine choice, build the rest of your Jeep out for your need. If you're going to run light trails and then daily drive your Jeep, build it accordingly. If you're going to trailer your Jeep to Fordyce, run it through the trail, and then trailer it back home, then build it according to that. As you can imagine, with the LT1 and the 8-speed, this Jeep runs like a dream. Doesn't matter how heavy it is, doesn't matter how much armor he has, and it's getting pretty good economy. I didn't take exact numbers, but I'm going to say I'm averaging 14. I know from South Salt Lake to Beaver, we averaged about 45, 50 miles an hour. We had a snow and ice storm, temps were below zero, and I had to slow down. I think my average speed was about, well, anywhere from 25 to 40 miles an hour. I really couldn't go much more than that. But I averaged over 18 miles to the gallon, just cruising along at that slow, steady speed. Normally you're going to get less economy in really cold weather just because of the engine performance dynamics. However, when you slow down that much and you hold a steady speed, your aerodynamic drag is a lot lower, the load is a lot lower, especially going up hills. So we saw really good economy. Getting back to the engine, the LT1 and the high gear transmission is just phenomenal. It makes pretty much every JK effortless to drive. It doesn't matter if you're going uphill, downhill, how much your JK weighs. If you're towing a trailer, it just pulls your Jeep with ease. And that just makes your Jeep fun to drive and something you look forward to getting into, especially on these long trips. You will notice that the market is trying to migrate towards the LT. Doesn't matter if it's an LS, a supercharged V6, a Hemi, the LT is just proving itself to be superior. Just everything that's going on in the country right now is driving the costs up of doing these conversions. In fact, the price of steel has gone up 2.5 times what we make our brackets out of and such, and our converters have more than doubled on our exhaust systems. Getting stuff has been more difficult, but getting the LTs has not been a problem. So there's another advantage is because these LTs are in current production, getting the LT3 and the LT1 have been no issue. Now the LT4 and the LT7, as you know, we've done an LT7 and it runs awesome. We're going to support it, and they are the new engines, truck engines from GM. So you guys wanting to do the LT4 and the LT7, they will be supported soon, along with the LAT, the 6.6 liter iron block engine. We are working on the LTEO, as you know, and we're also working on streamlining the LSEO. Sorry there hasn't been a lot of videos lately, but the shop was closed for 2 weeks for the holidays, and a bunch of our guys did end up getting sick, so productivity has really gone down over the last month or so. But we're all back, and we're hoping that this year we can break some new ground with these new engines and get productivity back up where it needs to be. Actually, not back up where it needs to be, above that, because demand has really outstripped supply now for some time. We have a couple of month wait to do builds, and we're going to try to get that down. So we're going to take this Jeep up to the mountain, and we will see you shortly.